One little thing that when you play it makes everything collapse. Well, Firouzja plays that move right now. Welcome back to Chess Dog. Today we're going back to the Rapid and Blitz in St. Louis. Now we're in the Blitz portion of the tournament. The game we're going to look at today is between World Championship candidate Ian Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces and Alireza Firouzja with white. And in this game, the time control is 5 minutes for each side with a 2-second increment. Alireza begins with the move c4, the English opening, and Nepomniachtchi responds with e5. And here Alireza plays d3. Not the most common move. It's fairly committal, but you'll notice in this game he is not going to fianchetto on the king side, which is very common in English. Knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to c6, and then a3. The idea is that he can expand with b4, but he's got something else in mind, which we will see. After d5, the most natural move on the board, pawn takes, knight takes. What we have here is a Najdorf with colors reversed. Of course, this is an opening for black and a Sicilian, but essentially, Firouzja just has a Najdorf up a tempo, and we'll see how he handles the position. He begins with e4, grabbing space in the center. The knight goes to b6, and all of these moves are played in a Najdorf, just with colors reversed. Castles, castles, and then bishop to e3. And this square, in this case, on d4, is sort of the critical square on the board. White would love to be able to play d4 and liquidate black's central advantage. For black's part, he would love to just plant a knight and get it permanently entrenched on that d4 square. So there's a big battle over the d4 square. f5 was played. The idea is that Jan can kick that bishop away and remove its control over that d4 square. b4, and here Nepomniachtchi plays f4. This position had only been reached once before this game, and in that game, black played a6, and a really interesting footnote. In this game, and I don't actually remember the players, but black was rated 2100, white was rated 2600, and black won that game, which is quite a fascinating thing to me. We'll see if Jan can replicate that success, but he plays f4. The bishop goes back to c1. What Firouzja wants to do is play the bishop to b2 and hit this e5 pawn along with this knight, and also adds control again over to that key d4 square. a6 keeps white from kicking that knight away with b5. Bishop to b2. Bishop to f6 has to defend that pawn. And now knight b to d2, a very common idea in the Najdorf. The knight wants to go to b3, and then it can support a d4 pawn push in this case. Now here, Nepomniachtchi makes a very committal move. He plays the move g5, extremely aggressive and quite frankly a bit questionable. I doubt he would ever play this in a non-blitz game, and computers don't like it. Essentially, his pieces just aren't in position to support this kind of attack, and it leaves his king a little on the unprotected side. Firouzja plays h3 to keep g4 from coming, or at least slow it down. The bishop goes to e6. If the knight hops into b3, he might want to take that knight. The rook goes to c1, threatening an exchange sacrifice, a very common motif in the Najdorf. Rook takes knight, pawn takes rook, and then capturing on e5. And in exchange for a rook, you get a minor piece of pawn and a completely wrecked pawn structure. The threat would be devastating. So he plays queen to d6 to sort of cover that knight. Now the knight goes to b3, and here it probably would have been in Nepomniachtchi's best interest to go ahead and take that knight. This is a common idea, but he doesn't do it. He plays rook a to d8, and now the knight becomes a real problem for Nepomniachtchi. Firouzja plays knight to c5, hitting the b7 pawn as well as the e6 bishop, really sort of forcing this bishop to c8 move to defend the b7 pawn. And now rook to e1. That may look strange because there's so much clutter on the e-file, but the truth is after a move like, say, bishop to f1 or after d4 gets played, the rook actually is well placed on the e-file. Or if pieces exchange on d4, then this pawn would become passed. So the rook, believe it or not, is actually well placed on e1. h6 to support the g5 pawn in case he wants to move the bishop at f6 somewhere. Queen to c2, now threatening knight takes a6. And when the pawn takes the knight, this knight would lose its defender, and queen would take the knight, and he would win material. So a5 was played. And here, Firouzja takes, and Nepo recaptures the pawn. But here's the problem. This knight at c6 was a key piece controlling that d4 square we've been talking about. Well, now that knight is not on c6 anymore, and Firouzja, seeing that, goes ahead and plays d4, realizing that the defense of that square has been reduced by the knight on a5, and now Nepo is in some trouble. He responds with knight to c6. If he takes here, then e5 is actually quite a good move. Bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes, and we talked about this rook at e1. Now it's a different story. Bishop to c4 check, revealing an attack against the queen, is actually not that great because if knight takes bishop and if rook takes, the knight can retake, and black has sufficient material for the queen. The better move for white is actually bishop to g4, and then when the queen moves, bishop takes bishop, rook takes c8, and now rook to e6. And white's coming in and putting enormous pressure on black's king, and white's probably just winning here. But instead, Nepo avoids all that and plays knight to c6, d5, kicking the knight. The knight moves back to e7. And if you look at this structure, this locked structure in the center with black having kingside space, essentially what this is a king's Indian defense, but one where everything has gone right for the white pieces and wrong for the black pieces. And his king is in a lot of danger too. The knight goes to d3, just piling up on that e5 pawn. 3 minor pieces, attacking it. c6, pawn takes first. And now queen to c6 is probably the best shot. After queen c6, knight c6, black is still fighting. But white could play queen to b3 check, unveiling an attack against the queen. And after bishop takes, just rook takes queen. And then he takes the knight at the end of the variation and would be doing well. But instead, Nepomniachtchi plays a move bishop to e6. He doesn't do anything with the pawn at c6. And computers are adamant that white should just go ahead and take that pawn. Computers are greedy because they're brilliant defenders. Firouzja goes ahead and continues with his plan, which is to capture on e5. He wants to get at this king, opening up that center. Pawn takes c6, bishop to d4, attacking the knight on b6, queen to c7, defending it, and now knight takes c6. You can see the fruit of all of Firouzja's positional play is beginning to create material advantages. Bishop takes d4, knight fd4, attacking the bishop at e6, and in an attempt to try to patch up his position, Nepomniachtchi plays rook to d6. But this is too much, and basically, the straw that breaks the camel's back, that one little thing that when you play it makes everything collapse, well, Firouzja plays that move right now. e5. And that's it. He has to give up material. Rook takes c6, knight c6, giving up the exchange. Knight f5. Now queen to c5, moving in to Nepomniachtchi's position. King to g7, and then this beautiful, beautiful move. Knight to d4, unveiling an attack on the queen. And if Nepomniachtchi takes on c5, Firouzja does not immediately take back with the rook. Instead, he plays knight takes bishop check, forking the king and the queen, but he grabs a piece along the way. After king g8, knight to c5, he's up a rook and the game would be over. So Nepomniachtchi, trying to keep pieces on the board, plays queen to d7, but then knight to f5, check, and with 5 seconds left, he's losing so much material, the knight on d6 is about to fall, and Nepomniachtchi resigned. So an interesting colors reversed position, really the Najdorf, with the white pieces. I hope you enjoyed the game. See you again soon.